The black belt asked a black janitor to spar with him for fun. What happened next silenced the entire martial arts gym. "Hey, you there cleaning? How about a quick demonstration?" shouted Derek Mitchell from the center of the mat, his black belt gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "I bet you have never seen a real fight in your life, right?" James Washington stopped mopping the floor and slowly looked up. At 42, he had been working as a janitor at that gym for only 3 weeks, always arriving after hours when most classes had ended. But on that Thursday night, the advanced class was still training past its usual time. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more true stories. "I do not want to interrupt you, Sensei," James replied calmly, as he continued scrubbing a stubborn stain on the floor. "Just trying to finish up so you can get back to your lesson." Derek let out a theatrical laugh that echoed across the entire room. "Everyone look at this. The guy is scared to even step on the mat." The 8 students present laughed nervously, some clearly uncomfortable but afraid to say anything. What Derek did not know was that James had spent 2 decades trying to erase the man he once was. 20 years since he stepped away from the spotlight after an accident that changed his life forever. 20 years hiding a truth so heavy he could not share it even with his own daughter. "Come on, man," Derek continued with that smug grin he used to intimidate new students. "Just a quick show. I bet you do not even know what a guard is. How about letting my students see the difference between someone who trains and someone who just cleans?" James felt a familiar sensation in his chest, like an old muscle twitching awake after years of sleep. His eyes met Derek's for a moment, and something in that brief exchange made the instructor take an involuntary half-step back. "Just a harmless demonstration," Derek insisted, now trying to mask a flicker of uncertainty with bravado. "Nothing too serious. Just to remind everyone why we respect martial arts." James put the mop aside and straightened slowly. His movements had a strange fluidity for a man who supposedly never stepped on a mat before. The students stopped what they were doing, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. "All right," James said finally, his voice calm like a still lake before a storm. "But when this is over, you are going to apologize to them for turning this mat into a circus." Derek forced another laugh, though this one sounded less confident. "Apologize? You are going to be the one apologizing to the floor when it kisses your face." What nobody there realized was that James Washington had once been known by another name in arenas around the world. Silent Storm Washington, 5-time mixed martial arts world champion. A legend who vanished at his peak after a tragic accident that haunted him every day since. He had sworn never to fight again. But some vows break when dignity is dragged through the dirt. If you are enjoying this story of resilience and justice, do not forget to subscribe to the channel to see how one act of arrogance would become the harshest lesson of Derek Mitchell's life. Derek adjusted his black belt with exaggerated confidence, drinking in the attention. "Everyone gather around. You are about to see why there is a hierarchy in the world of martial arts." The 8 students formed a semicircle around the mat, curiosity mixed with discomfort. A young woman with her hair tied back muttered something to her partner, who just shook his head. "Look, everyone," Derek continued dramatically. "Here we have a perfect example of someone who never understood that there are places for certain kinds of people." James heard the words like echoes from the past. The same tone he had heard decades ago when people said men like him did not belong under bright lights. But age had given him something that arrogance could never buy. Control. The ability to turn anger into power instead of chaos. "Sensei," Derek, the young woman, spoke up timidly. "Maybe we can go back to training. It is getting late." "And Sarah Chun, are you questioning my methods?" Derek cut her off sharply. "Sit down and watch. This will teach you more in 5 minutes than a month of drills." James recognized that look in her eyes. Fear mixed with frustration. The same look he had seen in the mirror years ago after the accident that stole his best friend. Tony Rodriguez. A name that still burned like fire in his memory. Tony had died because of him. One sparring session gone wrong. James had lost control that night, fueled by the pressure and the hateful words hurled from the crowd. The investigation called it an accident, but James never forgave himself. And now this man wanted to turn the art into a spectacle of humiliation. "So Janitor," Derek sneered again, "how about you show them a basic guard? Or is that too hard for someone who only knows how to push a mop?" Laughter rippled through the gym, but James remained still. His eyes closed briefly, and in that moment he was back in Las Vegas under the blinding lights, hearing the same poisonous comments that shattered his focus years ago. "What is wrong?" Derek pressed, circling James like a predator. "Or are you just going to stand there like a lamppost?" That was when Derek made his first mistake. He shoved James lightly on the shoulder. A playful push on the surface, but loaded with arrogance. James did not move an inch. His feet might as well have been cemented to the ground. Derek felt like he had tried to push a wall. His smirk flickered. "Interesting," James murmured softly. "Been a while since anyone tried to wake that part of me." There was something in his tone that shifted the entire room. Not anger, not even defiance. It was calm, the kind of calm that spoke of storms past and storms coming. Still not sensing the danger, Derek doubled down. Hear that, guys? He thinks it is interesting. Let us show him what real skill looks like. What Derek could not see was that every word, every taunt was not sparking rage. It was lighting a fuse of clarity. James remembered exactly who he was, and he was done hiding. Sarah noticed the change first. His breathing, his posture, the way his body aligned so naturally, like a coiled spring ready to strike. It reminded her of documentaries on apex predators. Calm, silent, fatal. Last chance, buddy, Derek barked. Accept the demo or security walks you out, and you lose your job too. James opened his eyes. When his gaze met Derek's, the instructor felt a shiver crawl down his spine. It was like looking into the eyes of something far beyond his understanding. All right, James said at last. But when we are done, you will explain to them why you turned this place into a circus. Derek laughed nervously. Explain? You will be explaining how your face met the mat. No one there knew that James had spent 20 years transforming rage into something sharper than any punch. He was about to teach the hardest lesson Derek would ever learn. Derek motioned for one of the students to start a timer, though he was already planning to end it in seconds. James stepped barefoot onto the mat. His movements were slow and deliberate, but not stiff. Every motion had grace, like the rhythm of a man who had lived in this space once upon a time. You ready, old man? Derek mocked, but his laughter came out thinner than before. He raised his hands into a guard position and bounced lightly on his feet, trying to project confidence. James simply nodded. The students exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension thick as storm clouds. Derek lunged first, snapping out a jab with the speed that had impressed dozens of students in the past. James did not flinch. His head tilted just enough for the punch to slice through empty air. In the same breath, his left hand brushed against Derek's wrist, guiding the force away like water flowing around stone. That was not a block. That was something else. Something beautiful and terrifying. Derek regrouped, quickly forcing a grin. Lucky slip. Let us see you dodge this. He launched a quick combination, 2 hooks, and a low kick meant to rattle any untrained man. But every strike meant nothing but silence. James flowed like smoke, moving inches out of range with the calm precision of a master who did not need to rush. What are you doing? Derek barked, frustration cracking through his voice. Fight back. James' voice was steady as a drumbeat. This is fighting. Control before chaos. You should have learned that before putting on that belt. A ripple of murmurs ran through the students. They were not just watching a janitor. They were watching something rare, something primal yet refined. Derek roared more out of fear than anger and went for a takedown, lowering his level and charging like a bull. For the first time, James moved with speed. His hips shifted, weight melting into a sprawl, and in a blink, Derek was on his knees, his arm twisted gently but firmly behind his back. It looked effortless, like gravity itself had betrayed Derek. James leaned close, his words low, but every syllable sharp as glass. Power is nothing without respect. This art is not for your ego. The room was dead silent. Even the air felt heavy, like the world had paused to witness humility in its purest form. James released the hold and stepped back. Derek scrambled to his feet, his face flushed red, not from pain, but from shame. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. His students were staring not at him, but at the man he had tried to humiliate. One of them finally whispered, "Who are you?" James picked up the mop slowly as if nothing had happened. Just someone who loves this art enough to keep it clean. But the truth could not stay hidden. Sarah moved closer, studying him with wide eyes. Silent storm, she breathed, barely audible, but enough to send a shockwave through the room. Derek froze. The name hit him like a hammer. He had watched tapes of that fighter, the man who disappeared after a freak accident during a title bout. A legend whose matches were studied in dojos worldwide. James closed his eyes. That name felt like a ghost pressing against his chest. "Yes," he said softly, "but I left that world behind a long time ago." The students erupted with questions, all mixing with disbelief. "Was it really you? Why did you quit? Can you teach us?" Derek stood there hollow as realization poured in. He had mocked a man who had walked paths he could never dream of. He swallowed hard, and his voice cracked when he finally spoke. "I am sorry, James. I should have never disrespected you or this art." James studied him for a long moment before nodding once. "Apologies matter more than pride. Do better for them." He gestured toward the students whose eyes were now filled with something deeper than curiosity. "Respect." Before we move on, if this story of redemption has touched you, do not forget to like and subscribe. It helps us share more stories that matter. Over the next few weeks, the gym changed. Derek, humbled beyond measure, started every class with a bow so deep it spoke louder than words. James became more than a janitor. Quietly, without fanfare, he agreed to teach an early morning session twice a week, not for money, not for fame, but to keep the art alive in its purest form. The students came in droves, not because they wanted to fight, but because they wanted to learn from a man who had known both triumph and tragedy and emerged with wisdom instead of bitterness. One rainy evening after class, James sat on the bench watching raindrops race down the window. Sarah approached holding 2 cups of coffee. "You never told us why you quit," she said gently. James stared into the storm outside, his reflection barely visible in the glass. "I hurt someone I loved," he said finally, "and I promised myself never to let that happen again." Sarah placed the cup beside him. "Teaching us that respect matters more than pride, that matters, James. Maybe you are still fighting, just in a different way." Her words lingered long after she left. For the first time in 20 years, James felt something he thought he had buried: hope. Months later, the gym hosted a charity seminar to support underprivileged kids. The flyer listed a surprise guest instructor. On the day of the event, the mat was packed. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered rumors. And when James stepped forward wearing a plain white belt, the room erupted. He raised his hands to quiet them. "I am not here as Silent Storm," he said, his voice steady and strong. "I am here as James Washington, a man who believes martial arts is about respect, discipline, and growth. If you remember anything from today, let it be this: power is nothing without purpose." The applause that followed was thunderous, but James barely heard it. For the first time in decades, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. He had not come back to reclaim a throne. He had come back to build something better than glory. As the seminar ended, Derek approached, head bowed, voice trembling. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he said. James placed a hand on his shoulder. "We all stumbled, Derek. What matters is what we do after." That night, James walked out of the gym into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered on rain-soaked streets. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, but inside him, there was only calm. The storm had passed, and for the first time in years, James Washington allowed himself to smile.